All right, how's everybody doing today? Welcome back to You Don't Know Ball. I figured it was only right, post-draft, some of y'all are going to be having your fantasy drafts coming up soon, and it's only right that we start doing fantasy content. Now, I have a lot I have planned for y'all, a lot of stuff coming. I figured it's only best, though, that we start with the biggest sleepers, especially amongst the rookies that just got drafted. First position group we're going to cover today is the wide receivers. As I said, only sleepers. I'm not going to talk about the ones, everyone should know about or that y'all know about. I'm going to talk about the ones that maybe slip through the cracks for some of y'all, and that's totally fine. We're going to cover exactly why they have good value, and you should take them in the later rounds or even mid rounds. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, first one we got to talk about here is Malik Washington, 6th round pick to the Miami Dolphins. Now, the first thing that pops out to you when you look at Malik's numbers, to me at least, you're going to be looking here at the average. And again, we'll ignore the first 2 years because the first 2 years it's very, very minimal share, very, very minimal statistics. However, 2021 at Northwestern, 2022 at Northwestern, then 2023 at Virginia, we look at the average. He's averaging even on the 1,400 receiving yard season, 13 twice, and then rounding up 11 once. This is a guy with big play out written all over him, to an offense where they kind of really don't have their slot weapon yet. You might be saying, well, they have Braxton Berrios, but the reality is Braxton Berrios is probably replaceable this year very much by Malik Washington. When you're getting that value out of your 6th round draft pick, you have to be ecstatic about that if you're the Dolphins, but it also should make you guys ecstatic as fantasy users, knowing you could get somebody with this explosiveness, but potentially 3rd round of your fantasy drafts. Again, I don't know how some of you guys do it. I'm talking about the fantasy rookie drafts, dynasty. If you're doing a straight up, PPR, just draft straight, he's going to be available probably anywhere from, I don't know. He's going to be available past round 10. You know what I mean? So the reality of the situation is you're getting yourself fantastic value here with Malik Washington, a guy who definitely might have slipped through the cracks for some people. And just know, in this Dolphins offense, it's going to be stretching vertical where you're going to have to occupy with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. Whoever's underneath in that slot or going over them, they're going to be open a lot of time, as we all know. And that very likely is going to be Malik Washington now in this new offense. So with that being said, Malik Washington provides you guys fantastic value. All right, and up next, it's only right we talk about Javon Baker, 4th round pick to the New England Patriots. This is a guy I loved a ton throughout the draft process. I'm actually very shocked he fell all the way to the 4th round, but if you're a Patriots fan, you should be ecstatic about it. We come over and look at the stats. Again, the thing that should stand out to you. We look at again, we'll even disregard the first 2 years, similar to how we just did with Malik. But we come down here to the last 2 years at UCF. Look, man, 14.2 average yards reception the first season, and then 21.9 average yards per reception the second year. Talk about a big play waiting to happen. And he's got that size, 6'2", he's got the frame. And you're going to be in a Patriots receiving room where the reality of the situation is he will very likely find his way onto that starting 3, somewhere along the lines. I don't know if it's going to be in the slot. I don't know if it's on the outside. All I know is if you're asking me if I'm a betting man, I'm going to bet you almost certainly a lot of money that Javon Baker is going to be getting a very fair amount of targets this rookie season, regardless of draft position. And matter of fact, he truly could even outperform Jalen Polk. I love Jalen Polk. He's obviously not a sleeper with where he was drafted, but I'm saying in terms of value, especially in fantasy, Javon Baker could truly provide you the same, if not a better upside as Jalen Polk right here in year 1. Again, whether you're getting him in Dynasty, whether you're getting him in single season PPR, you're going to be able to get him later than you should be able to. So keep that in mind. Act accordingly. Javon Baker's definitely going to be someone, if you can get on your roster, you're going to love him in fantasy. All right, and next up we have Jermaine Burton, 3rd round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals out of Alabama. Now, if you don't know the story on Jermaine Burton by now, I'm just going to give you the fill-in. This is a guy with tons of talent. The questions come about behavior. There's been some issues, off the field, on the field. But the reality of the situation is, I think this is a guy super talented, where if he can just get it together, TJ Houshmandzadeh has said, as he was drafted, this pick is very special to me. This is a kid I've been working with. He didn't say, but he has a lot of faith in him, obviously, and a former Bengal legend himself. If you're a Bengals fan, you got to be really happy about that, and, relax that, what, I think he's going to cool off. I think this is going to be somebody that's going to come in, ready to play ball, put all that BS behind him. But more importantly, we come and look at the numbers. Again, we want to talk about what's going to stand out and what should stand out to you looking at these numbers. And we can do this for all 4 years even, because even though the sample size isn't as big at Alabama, you're still getting relative, where we can make it work. Look at the average every single year. 15, 19.1, 16.9, 20.5. And even look, 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns past couple years. It's a guy threat in the red zone, threat in between the lines. The reality situation is Jermaine Burton, I do believe, is going to be a better pro than he was a college player. He's one of those guys who fits into that kind of niche archetype. Because, again, back to the issues in college, I think we're going to be over that. I think we're going to move past it. And a team like the Bengals, with leadership like Joe Burrow, perfect spot to land in. Not to mention, if T. Higgins is traded or, doesn't sign again next year, whatever the situation is going to be with T. Higgins, which it's looking like we're leaning towards. I'm not saying that he's the T. Higgins replacement necessarily, because he's not that same archetype. But I do think you're going to get somebody that at the very least you can throw in the slot, expect major productivity from, and potentially be a 1,000+ yard receiving guy within the first couple seasons, a few seasons of his career. Fantastic upside. And in terms of fantasy and dynasty, probably be able to get him, second round, third if you're lucky. But then single season, you'll be able to get him definitely, far down those rounds. You're going to be getting great value. Jermaine Burton is somebody you definitely don't need to be sleeping on. And be ready to click on his name if it's available to you. All right, next up, we got the Ravens' 4th round pick out of North Carolina, Devontae Walker. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are saying exactly what Hunter said to me, after the Ravens drafted him. And what you're probably saying is, is Devontae Walker just another reincarnation of the receivers that the Ravens have been drafting over the last 3 or 4 years? Guys with super high upside, but the hands are just never going to let it come together. Now, I'll acknowledge off the bat, the hands scare me a little bit, and he's obviously got a lot of improving to do with that at the next level. But if we're willing to look past that, and we're willing to say, no, Devontae is going to improve a lot. He's going to be able to find a niche in this Ravens offense. He's going to be able to make it work with Lamar as his deep threat and finally be that deep threat for him. You're saying to yourself, we got fantastic upside on a guy that'll definitely be available for you round 2 or 3 in Dynasty, and definitely fairly later in single season leagues. Again, we come right back to the numbers. Right off the bat, you're noticing a theme by now. You're not the only one. Look, even on the rookie, not rookie, but the freshman season where even not a lot of sample size, we're going to kind of disregard it. 24.8. Okay. But the last 2 seasons, at Kent State, North Carolina, again, 16, we're rounding up, 16 average, and then 17 the next year. Very, very consistent. It's a guy who's going to burn you down the sidelines, burn you down the seams. Again, if the hands were just better, this would be a guy that would have gone earlier. He was definitely expected to go earlier in the consensus. Very surprising he fell away to the 4th round. If you're a Ravens fan, though, again, you got to be ecstatic about that. But this is a guy that's going to provide you fantastic value potentially in the later rounds of your fantasy league. I will admit, he certainly is one of the ones that I'm a little bit less confident in because of the drop issues that we've seen. But again, you put it together and you get rid of those, and all of a sudden, especially in the Ravens offense that is definitely not very heavy on pass catchers for Lamar, you could be getting astronomically good value in either your dynasty or your single season leagues. Devontae Walker's definitely a guy that if I have the opportunity, I'm going to take a flyer on. All right, and up next, we got the San Francisco 49ers 4th round pick out of Arizona, Jacob Cowan. And I'm going to admit to you guys, if you've been following through the draft process, you already know. But definitely one of my personal favorites on this list. In terms of the film, this is a guy who I think has an astronomically high upside in the NFL. And there's a lot of statistics to go along with that. But I'm not going to get into all that. The bottom line is, this is a guy where, given his draft value, is definitely now officially a sleeper. And again, a guy where I think you're going to be getting fantastic value in your leagues, whether dynasty or single season PPR. Now again, we come over and look at the stats. Again, the theme is very apparent, but you'll notice there's a little bit of a drop off here towards this last season, but that's also because the reception number is very high with 90 catches. Of course, it's going to skew the average a little bit, but it doesn't really, because the bottom line is still that average is very high. We're 0.1 away from being able to round up to still a 10 yards per catch average, which is amazing when you're on 90 catches. Look, this is a guy who definitely has a broad skill set. He's really good in the short game. He's also good in the intermediate game. And he's also a burner down the sideline or the seam where you have a lot of options with him. You can definitely get this guy on jet sweeps. You can kind of do whatever with Jacob Cowan, which is why, again, I said I'm very high in his skill set. And I think he's going to be somebody, especially in that Niners offense, where if we're assuming that either Ayuk or Debo or potentially both find themselves out of that room within the next couple seasons, or even this season. Again, it's not going to be both this season, barring something insane. But one of them, which the rumors have been swirling for a long time now, all of a sudden, even obviously I didn't mention Ricky Pearsall because he's not a sleeper, especially given where he was drafted. But all of a sudden, Pearsall and Cowan are going to have themselves a very, very, I don't want to say incredible workload, but they're going to have a lot better workload than a lot of people expected coming into this season or, the future of the situation with the Niners, if you follow what I'm saying. The thing about Jacob Cowing that I really do like is, to me, and I've been saying this for a while, he's kind of like a Brandon Cooks 2.0 mold. Again, the college stats don't match that. Brandon Cooks at that final season at Oregon State, absolutely cooking. But the bottom line is, this Jacob Cowing, I think, is someone who can hit a similar ceiling, produce very high at the NFL level. And how about that, even for, to kind of wrap it all together? So like I said before about a couple of these other guys, somebody who can produce better at the NFL level they did at college, even though he already produced a lot in college. Jacob Cowing, very high in him. If you have a chance, late second, early third in Dynasty, and then, wherever you can find him in single season, you feel the value's good. Definitely a guy you want to take a flyer on. Definitely don't sleep on Jacob Cowing. All right, now on to the Browns' 5th round pick out of Louisville, Jamari Thrash. This is a guy who, stood out to me in the process early, for one thing, where, this is a guy who, very physical, runs every route, very intense. That's one thing I loved about his game. And to see him fall to the Browns, where all of a sudden, you put yourself in a situation where, we're already looking at the depth chart, you're right behind Elijah Moore in that slot. If Elijah Moore has an injury or doesn't produce up to standard, Jamari Thrash is somebody who could potentially get starting reps at some point, even earlier than expected, some point this season. If you have a chance to draft Jamari Thrash anywhere from mid-second to late third in Dynasty, and wherever you're comfortable in single season, I think this is a guy that could provide amazing value, especially because we know, look, if Deshaun can come back to pure form that we used to know, at this point it's a little bit shaky what to expect out of Deshaun. I mean, the reality is just that we don't really know. Is Deshaun ever going to get back to his old self? Is Deshaun going to be kind of injury-riddled and just how it's been for the past couple years? We're not going to know at this point until that we see him out there this season. I think we'll have a lot of questions answered. But that's not anything we can really associate with Jamari Thrash, minus the fact that we don't know what to expect, right? That's the bottom line. When we come look at Jamari Thrash's numbers, right? The theme is still prevalent. A guy who every year, minus that freshman year, was not really much sample, and even sophomore. But we can look and see a guy with the big play ability. 14.1, 18.4, 13.6. And again, the numbers dropped off a little bit coming from the Sun Belt to the ACC, but it's to be expected when you're in the first year of a new offense and, you're a senior. Like, the reality situation is it's not anything to be unexpected, anything crazy, and it still is good numbers. And like I said, Jamari Thrash, someone who's very physical, I think is going to fit in this Browns offense very well because when you block and you're willing to put your body on the line and do that every single rep like Jamari does, well, I think, again, you're going to find your way on the field much faster than maybe the consensus expects or Browns fans expect or a lot of people expect. But I think this is someone you could be getting fantastic value on. Again, anywhere from late second, third, beyond, and then in single season wherever you're comfortable, Jamari Thrash, definitely somebody to be ready to click their name on in your fantasy drafts. All right, and then up next we got the New Orleans Saints 5th round pick out of Pittsburgh, Bub Means. This is a guy where, again, I will tell you guys, especially as a Saints fan, the situation with Bub is maybe a little bit more, it just depends on how things go, because and specifically, more than anything, I think it really depends on A.T. Perry's development. If A.T. Perry is the guy that a lot of Saints fans think he could be this upcoming season, Bub Means is not going to see the field as much, and it'll take a little bit longer for him to get acclimated and start really getting the targets he needs to be a true sleeper, especially in fantasy. But on the hand where A.T. Perry doesn't produce a lot this year, and Bub Means has a chance to come in right away, or if an injury happens, right, one of the two, and Bub Means has a chance to step in that wide receiver 3 role and kind of just, have a chance to really excel, get those starting reps, and produce, all of a sudden, Bub Means could provide you guys fantastic fantasy value. And because, again, the Saints wide receiver room is kind of just a little bit weird right now, a little dicey, where I don't know where he's going to find his role. I don't know where he's going to find his niche, but I do believe it will be somewhere eventually, even if it's not this season. He might be more of a guy you kind of stash for the future next season or two. But again, I think you're getting a guy where we look, obviously, the big playability, 19.5 at Louisiana Tech, and then 15 hit the sophomore year, and then senior year, we're looking at 17.6 receiving yards. Again, the theme of this, of the sleepers, as we've noticed, is the big playability. And Bub Means still has that at the 6'2 frame, big body. Definitely somebody, especially in the Saints offense, that loves those type of bodies, that loves those type of targets. Bub Means could definitely find out, crafting himself out a role sooner than later, and he's definitely worth 3rd round in Dynasty and, wherever you're comfortable with him in single season, but definitely more down the line in single season because, again, like I said, I don't know when he's going to craft out that role in the Saints offense. His is a little bit more of a hard path to the top than some of the other guys we've talked about, but nonetheless, still a guy worth a flyer that could provide you fantastic value down the road. All right, and then the final couple guys we're going to cover today. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a cop-out, forgive me, but y'all are going to understand where I'm coming from, man, I promise. Look, Johnny Wilson and Aeneas Smith, the 5th and 6th round picks for the Eagles this year, I think, again, you're going to understand my point here of why I had to talk about them all as one. Because the reality of the situation is, the way the Eagles receiving room is set up right now, it's kind of like one of them has a chance to really come in and take that wide receiver 3 role. But again, I'm not sure who it's going to be, and they're very, very different archetypes of receiver. So, it just kind of depends where the cards fall. And if an injury happens at a certain spot, one of them is definitely going to have more of a role on the outside as opposed to the other, where there's definitely, you're going to get what I'm saying. So let's get into it. Let's discuss both their upsides and where they fit into the Eagles offense. All right, so we're going to start with Johnny Wilson here. And specifically about Johnny Wilson, he's someone who I think will find more of a role if there's an injury in the Eagles, receiving core at some point of the season with either, and I know Eagles fans don't want to hear this, nobody does, but A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. If something like that were to happen, I think Johnny Wilson is going to be the guy who provides you better value, especially this rookie season. I think he's much more of the outside guy, with that frame, with that body. He's going to be filling more of an outside role in any offense. But then, if, right now, look, Devontae Parker is the starting wide receiver 3 for the Eagles. And, Devontae Parker just doesn't separate anymore. He actually, statistically, has been the worst separator in the league multiple seasons in a row. I'm not bashing the man, it's just the truth. So if, in the case where his role is diminished early and he's not getting reps, I think all of a sudden, we come over to Aeneas Smith and say he would be the guy who would be very much, getting those targets, getting the role much earlier. So, again, this one is one where I'm going to leave it up to you. Whatever you think the situation is that the Eagles are going to fall into, where one of these guys is going to get better value than the other. And let me be clear, could Johnny Wilson be like a big slot kind of guy and maybe even, could he steal that role? Well, for sure. And it would be very interesting to see. I'm not counting him out. All I'm saying is I would lean Aeneas, though, with the skill set he has, obviously. But again, we're talking about guys that both have that big playability, guys that both definitely have a chance to step into this Eagles offense this rookie season and make a little bit of, I don't want to say magic happen, but definitely produce, get some fantasy points for it, you guys. And you're going to be able to get, I believe, either of these guys, 3rd round, potentially even later, where you get him as a fantasy UDFA. But the bottom line is, 2 guys you need to be keeping your eye on. Don't forget about these guys, especially with the roles that they both have potentially in front of them in an Eagles offense where you could potentially be getting fantastic value. All right, and that will do it for today. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you enjoyed today's content and you're looking for more fantasy content, like I said, I got a lot coming for you guys. So drop a like, drop a sub. We would love to see you back. You have a great rest of your day or night, and we'll hope to see you soon.